My father was a gravedigger and took me to the cemetery at dawn. My mother said, "Go, it's how we put food on the table." He made me kneel in a grave and beat me. But what I discovered inside that same grave where he threw me will leave you speechless. Hi, my dear ones. Oh, how wonderful to have you here with me today. Come on in, come closer. You're always welcome in my home. Look, I'm here in my kitchen making some homemade caramel fudge, the kind you stir for hours in a copper pot. The sweet smell is filling the whole house, and I already know my grandkids will show up soon asking to lick the spoon. This fudge recipe is one I learned when I moved here to Asheville, North Carolina, many years ago. A kind neighbor taught me, and since then I make it every week to sell at the local farmer's market. It's a simple thing, but it gives me some pocket money and keeps my mind busy. My name is Laura Peterson. I'm 73 years old, and I was born in Winston-Salem, also here in North Carolina. I came here to Asheville when I was in my early 20s, running away from a life that, well, you'll understand soon why I had to leave my hometown in such a hurry. Today I live in this humble little house close to the church with my small backyard where I raise some chickens and grow vegetables. I make my caramel fudge, sell it at the market on Saturdays, and the rest of the time I stay here taking care of the house and receiving visits from my 2 children and 4 grandchildren. I started making this fudge right after I managed to settle here in the city. I needed to work, needed to support myself, and didn't know how to do much, but stirring a pot that I learned quickly. And look, it's been over 50 years making this sweet treat. But before I continue my story, I want to make a special request to those of you watching now. If you can, click that red button to subscribe to Grandparents' Tales, and don't forget to hit the bell, because that way you won't miss any story this grandma has to tell. I'm so grateful for every subscription, every like. You have no idea how much this means to me, being able to share what I've lived through with people who want to listen. And you, my dear ones watching right now, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? And what time did you find Grandma Laura's video? Was it in the morning, having your coffee? In the afternoon, during your break? Or is it already evening, before bed? I always read all the comments. I'm so happy to know where you're from and when you take time out of your day to listen to this grandma's stories. Please tell me. Let's create a chain of kindness, a network of people who care about each other. You know, my children, today I'm here peacefully, stirring my caramel fudge, with my grandkids playing in the backyard. But it wasn't always like this. There was a time, back in my youth, when I thought I wouldn't survive. A time when the darkness was so great that I saw no way out. And the worst part is that the one who should have protected me was exactly the one who hurt me. Today, I'm going to tell you a very difficult, very painful story. A story about buried secrets, about lies that lasted years, and about a truth that came to light in the most unexpected way possible. It's a story about my father, about his work, and about what happened when the whole town slept and he took me with him to the cemetery. Take a deep breath, my child. Grab your coffee, get comfortable, because what I have to tell isn't easy. But it's important. Because if my story can help even one person, it's worth every word. I was born in 1952, in Winston-Salem, in a very humble house on the edge of town. Our house was in a somewhat isolated place, you know? Almost on the border with the rural area, very close to the municipal cemetery. My father, Walter Peterson, was the town's gravedigger. And he wasn't just any gravedigger. He was the oldest one, who had been working there for over 20 years when I was born. Everyone in town knew Walter, the man who took care of the dead. We lived in a small house, just 3 rooms. The walls were exposed brick without plaster, and the floor was rough concrete. There was a living room that served as everything, a place to eat, to receive visitors when someone came, which was rare, to do homework. There was a small bedroom that was my parents', and I slept in a corner of the living room on an iron bed against the wall. The kitchen was separate, with a wood stove that my mother, or rather, the woman I called Mother, used to cook. Irene, that was her name. I grew up thinking Irene was my real mother. I had no reason to suspect otherwise. She took care of me in her way, a cold, dry way, but she took care of me. Made food, washed clothes, told me to take a bath. But never, in all my childhood, do I remember her giving me a real hug. You know? A hug that warms the heart. Never gave me a good-night kiss. Never sat with me to talk about how my day had been. It was all very mechanical. As if she had an obligation to keep me alive, but not to love me. My father was a tall, strong man with sunburned skin and calloused hands from so much digging. He had a characteristic smell, a mixture of earth, sweat, and whiskey. Because Walter drank, you see, drank every day. He'd come home from the cemetery in the late afternoon, already a bit tipsy, eat dinner in silence, and go to bed early. On weekends, he drank even more. And when he drank too much, he'd get a strange look. A look that scared me, even though I was a child and didn't really understand why. I had no siblings. It was just me, alone in that strange house with those two adults who seemed to live in another world. I went to school in the morning, the local elementary school right in the neighborhood, and spent afternoons playing alone in our yard. We had a large yard, with dirt ground, with some fruit trees in the back. I played house, made mud pies, talked to the chickens that Irene raised. Sometimes one or another girl from the neighborhood would come play with me, but it was rare. The other children were somewhat afraid of me. I think because I was the gravedigger's daughter, you know? There was that superstition, that silly fear. Irene worked as a laundress. She washed clothes for others, for some wealthier families in town. She spent all day at the washtub, scrubbing, wringing, hanging clothes on the line, and I stayed nearby, quiet, playing in my corner. She didn't talk much to me. Occasionally she'd give an order. Laura, go fetch water from the well. Laura, collect the eggs from the chickens. Laura, sweep this yard. And I obeyed, perfectly. I remember when I was about 7, 8 years old, I started noticing some strange things. Irene didn't have any photos of when she was pregnant with me. I'd see neighbors showing off their baby bump photos, telling funny pregnancy stories, and Irene never said anything. When I asked about the day I was born, she'd change the subject. You were born and that's it, Laura. Stop with the silly questions. It was always like that. Another strange thing, I didn't look anything like her. Irene was short, had very straight black hair, small slanted eyes. I, since I was little, was tall, with curly hair, big light eyes. People would comment, "What a pretty girl. But she doesn't take after her mother. Must take after her father." But I didn't look much like Walter either. It was as if I had come from somewhere else. And there was something that gave me chills. Sometimes, when my father came home from the cemetery and looked at me, his face would contort into a strange expression. It looked like anger mixed with pain. Once, I must have been about 9 years old, I was combing my hair in front of the broken mirror we had, and he passed behind me and stopped. He stared at me through the mirror with such a scary face that I froze. Then he muttered softly, more to himself than to me. More like her every day. And he left, leaving me there trembling, understanding nothing. Irene and Walter had a weird relationship. They barely talked, didn't show affection for each other. They slept in the same room, but it was as if they were two strangers sharing the same house. And I, right in the middle of it all, growing up quietly, trying not to bother anyone, trying to be a good girl so as not to awaken my father's anger. When I was about 10 years old, I started noticing that my father spent a lot of time at the cemetery. It wasn't just his normal work. He'd come home in the late afternoon, have dinner, and then, around 11 at night, he'd get dressed again and leave. Going to do the night shift, he'd say. And Irene wouldn't question it. She'd just nod and continue knitting or mending clothes. I'd stay in my little bed, pretending to sleep, but actually listening to the gate creak when he left. And I'd wonder, what kind of work does a gravedigger have to do at dawn? Back then, I didn't understand anything. I was just a child. But it stayed in my head, bothering me. There was one time, I must have been about 11. that I woke up in the middle of the night and the house was strangely silent. I got up very slowly and went to the window. I saw my father there in the yard, sitting on a stool under the moonlight, with a bottle of whiskey in his hand. And he was crying. A big, strong man, crying like a child. And he repeated a name, Diana, Diana, why did I do this? I didn't know who Diana was. I'd never heard that name before, but the way he said it, the pain in his voice, that marked me. And that's how I spent my childhood, my dear ones. Between the heavy silence of that house, the coldness of the woman I called mother, and the strange mysteries surrounding my father. I was a quiet, obedient girl, always trying not to cause trouble. But inside, there were so many unanswered questions, so many strange feelings I couldn't explain. When I turned 12, things started to change. Not for the better. My body began to transform. I started to become a young woman. And my father's gaze on me began to get even stranger, even more disturbing. Irene noticed, I'm sure of it, but she never did anything, never protected me, just looked away and continued with her cold, distant life. The years went by, and I grew up. From 12 to 18, a lot changed in my body, but life in that house remained the same, cold, silent, heavy. When I entered adolescence, I began to notice even more how different I was from Irene. My hair became even curlier, honey-colored. My eyes were green, large. I was tall, had a slim waist. People on the street started to comment, "What a beautiful young woman." And the more others complimented, the more my father's face would close up. He started drinking even more. And when he drank, he'd look at me with that gaze that mixed anger, fear, and something I couldn't decipher. It was as if I were simultaneously someone he loved and hated with all his strength. I felt uncomfortable in my own skin. I started walking with my head down, wearing loose clothes, trying to hide, but it didn't help. He always saw me. Irene remained distant, never explained anything to me about being a woman, about the changes in my body. I learned everything on my own, talking with classmates at school, reading in secret. And when I tried to start a conversation with her, ask about family, about the past, she'd cut me off. "Don't be asking silly questions, girl. Go mind your own business." When I turned 18 in 1970, I finished school, didn't have money to continue studying, so I stayed home, helping Irene with the laundry and taking care of the house. My father continued working at the cemetery, coming home later and later, more and more drunk. And then, one night, everything changed. I had just turned 19. It was March 1971, terribly hot. I was lying in my little bed, trying to sleep, when I heard my father call me. "Laura, get up. Tonight you're coming with me." I got up scared, not understanding. "Go where, Dad?" He was at the door, already dressed in his work clothes, those old pants and long-sleeved shirt even in the heat. "To the cemetery. I'll need help tonight." I looked at Irene, hoping she'd say something, that she'd protect me. But she just nodded and said, with that cold voice of hers, "Go, Laura. Obey your father. It's how we put food on the table. He needs help with the weight of the graves." I didn't understand. What weight? What graves? But I obeyed. I always obeyed. I put on a long skirt and a blouse, put on my old sandals, and followed my father down the dark street. It was almost midnight. The whole town was asleep. You could only hear the sound of our footsteps on the dirt ground and the crickets singing. The cemetery was about 15 minutes from home. When we arrived at the iron gate, my father took out a bunch of keys from his pocket and opened the padlock. The gate groaned, and we entered. I had never been inside there at night. During the day, when I'd go with school on Memorial Day, I already found that place scary. At night then, it was terrifying. My father lit a lantern and started walking down the narrow paths between the graves. I followed behind, my heart pounding. "Dad, what are we going to do?" He didn't answer, just kept walking, until we reached a very old part of the cemetery, way in the back. It was an abandoned place where the graves were old, broken, covered with weeds. He stopped in front of a shallow grave without a headstone, just with a rotten wooden cross. And then he turned to me. His look, in the weak light of the lantern, was of a possessed man. "Kneel there," he ordered, pointing to the ground. I froze. "Dad, I don't understand. What?" "Kneel!" he shouted, and I crouched down, trembling with fear. It was there, that first night, that I understood I hadn't come to help with any grave. I had come to serve as an outlet for his anger, for his pain, for something I didn't understand. He took off his belt, that thick leather belt he always wore, and he began. He hit my back, my arms, my head, and while he hit, he screamed things that made no sense. "Why were you born? Why do you have her eyes? You're to blame for everything, everything!" I cried, begged him to stop, but he seemed not to hear me. It was as if he were beating someone else, a ghost from the past. When he finally stopped, I was lying on the ground, all bruised, all hurt. He breathed heavily, hand on his chest, and then said with a trembling voice, "Get up, let's go." And we went. We returned home in silence, him in front, staggering, me behind, dragging my legs, holding back tears. When we got home, Irene was awake, sitting in the kitchen chair. She looked at me, saw the state I was in, dirty with earth, with purple marks on my arms, and said nothing. Just took a wet cloth and wiped my wounds in silence. Then she murmured, "Don't irritate him, Laura. Do what he says." And that's how my hell began. Every week, 2, 3 times, he'd wake me up at dawn. "Tonight, you're coming with me." And I'd go, because I didn't know what to do, because I thought it was my obligation to obey my father, because Irene said it was how we put food on the table and I had to help, always in the same place, always at that shallow grave, nameless, in the forgotten back of the cemetery. Always the belt, always the screams. "Why were you born? Why do you look just like her? You remind me of her every day." I started to fear sleeping, fear hearing his voice calling me. I started having nightmares. My body was always sore, full of marks I hid with long clothes. I felt dirty, broken, useless. Once I gathered courage and asked, "Dad, who are you talking about? Who is her?" He stopped, looked at me with that crazy look and growled, "Shut up. Don't talk about this subject ever again." And he slapped my face so hard it threw me to the ground. I started avoiding mirrors, because when I looked at myself, I only saw someone who caused pain. Someone who, by existing, made my own father hate me. I didn't understand why. I didn't understand anything. I just felt the pain, the physical pain from the marks on my body, and the emotional pain from thinking I was the problem, that I deserved it. Irene kept pretending she didn't see anything. During the day, she'd tell me to do the housework normally, wash clothes, cook, clean, as if the nights at the cemetery didn't exist. She lived her life, mechanical, cold, and I lived mine, erased, destroyed. I tried to ask for help once. I spoke to a neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, a kind lady who had always been nice to me. I told her, crying, that my father beat me. She looked at me with pity and said, "Child, a father is a father. He must have his reasons. Respect your father, because when God takes you, you'll need him to forgive you for your sins." And she did nothing. Nobody did anything. It was the 70s, in small-town North Carolina. A father could do whatever he wanted with his children, and nobody interfered. I was 19 years old and felt I was going to die there, that I would never be able to escape that cycle of pain and humiliation. But I didn't know that the truth about who I was, about what had happened, about that grave where I knelt every week, that truth was about to come to light in the most shocking way possible. The months went by, and those trips to the cemetery became a macabre routine in my life. I was 19, 20 years old, and no longer recognized who I was. The green-eyed young woman I saw in the mirror was disappearing, being replaced by a scared, hunched shadow without light. The worst wasn't just the marks on my body, my dear ones. Those I could hide with long clothes, with long sleeves even in the North Carolina heat. The worst were the marks nobody saw, the marks on my soul. I started to believe that I really was guilty of something, that I had been born wrong, that my very existence was a sin that needed to be punished. There was one night, I must have been about 20, that was marked in my memory as one of the worst. It was a full moon night, I remember well, because the whole cemetery was illuminated by that silver and cold light. My father had drunk more than usual. When he called me, his voice was slurred, dragging. "Let's go, Laura. Tonight there's work." We walked there and, as always, went straight to that grave. But that night, he was different, more aggressive, more violent. He made me kneel, as always, but before starting with the belt, he stood looking at me for a long time. And then he started talking, between drunken sobs. "Do you know why I do this to you, Laura? Do you know? Because you are her. You look just like her. Every day that passes, you look more like her. Her hair, her eyes, the way she walks, everything about her. And I can't stand it. I can't stand seeing her in you every day." I trembled, kneeling on that cold ground. "Dad, who is she? Please tell me, who is she?" He laughed, a bitter, painful laugh. "She's right here under you, my daughter, right here, where you're kneeling. She's buried here, without a name, without a headstone, without anything, because she didn't deserve anything. She betrayed me. She was going to leave me, and I... He didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he grabbed the belt and started hitting with a fury I had never seen before. I fell to the ground, curled up, protecting my head with my arms. And while I was being beaten, all I could think was, is there someone buried here? Did my father bury someone in this grave? And who is this person he says I look like? When he finally stopped, I could barely stand up. He walked away, staggering, and left me there, fallen on the ground. It took me a while to gather the strength to get up and go back home. When I arrived, at daybreak, Irene was in the kitchen preparing coffee. She looked at me, saw the state I was in, and simply said, "Go take a shower, and don't leave the house today. You're too bruised." It was always like that. She saw, she knew, but never did anything, and I began to understand that she wasn't just omissive. She was an accomplice. She knew everything, maybe even knew what was in that grave, and chose to pretend she didn't see. I tried to run away once. I saved up the little money I could, some change left over when Irene sent me to buy something at the store, and planned to take the bus to Charlotte. I didn't know anyone there, didn't know where I was going, but anywhere was better than that house, that cemetery, that life. I packed a small bundle with my few clothes and waited for everyone to sleep. But when I was leaving through the kitchen door, Irene was there, sitting in the dark, as if waiting for me. "Where do you think you're going, Laura?" I need to get out of here, Mrs. Irene. I can't take it anymore. Please, let me go." She lit the lantern and looked at me with those cold eyes. "You're not going anywhere. You think you have somewhere to go? Without money, without education, without anything? Who's going to want you? You're marked. You're the grave digger's daughter. You're good for nothing but obeying your father." And then she told me something that froze me. "And besides, girl, if you leave here, if you open your mouth to anyone about what happens, your father will go to jail. And you know what will happen to me? I'll starve to death. Because who's going to support me? So you're going to stay quiet here. You're going to keep helping to put food on the table, and you're not going to say anything to anyone. Understood?" She blackmailed me, manipulated me, made me believe that if I ran away, I would destroy their lives. And, as incredible as it may seem, I felt guilty. I went back to my corner, put away my bundle, and continued living that hell. The nights at the cemetery continued. 2, 3 times a week, always the same grave, always the same words. You're to blame for everything, always the same pain. And I started to disconnect from my own body, you know? When he started hitting, I'd close my eyes and go somewhere else in my head. I'd imagine a house far away, with a garden full of flowers, where nobody hurt me, where I was loved. There was an afternoon. I remember it was a Saturday. I was hanging clothes on the line and a neighbor, Mrs. Collins, came to talk to me. She must have been about 40, a simple, good woman. She kept looking at me and then asked softly, "Laura, are you okay, my child? You're so thin, so pale. And these marks on your arm, what's that?" For a moment, I thought about telling. Thought about opening my mouth and screaming the truth. But Irene's voice echoed in my head. "If you speak, he'll go to jail. I'll starve to death. It's all your fault." So I smiled, that fake smile I had learned to make, and lied. "Oh, Mrs. Collins, I fell in the backyard, slipped and hurt myself, but everything's fine." She didn't seem convinced, but didn't insist. And I lost another chance to be saved. I started having very dark thoughts, my dear ones, thoughts that scared me. Sometimes, when I was alone in the yard, I'd look at the clothesline rope and think, would it be easier? If I weren't here anymore, would this pain end? I was 21 years old, and already tired of living. I saw no future. I saw no hope. And my body started to show the signs. I lost a lot of weight, my hair started falling out in clumps, my skin lost color. I had pain all over my body, pains that never went away, pain in my back, in my arms, in my legs, pain in my soul. There was one night, already in 1972, I was kneeling in that grave, and while my father screamed and beat me, I looked at that earth beneath me and thought, who are you? Who is here underneath? Why does my father say I look like you? And for the first time, instead of just feeling fear, I felt anger. Anger at that unknown woman who, even dead, caused so much suffering in my life. Anger at my father. Anger at Irene. Anger at myself for being so weak, for not being able to react. But I didn't know, my dear ones, that this anger, this desire to understand, would be exactly what would save me. Because the truth, no matter how buried it is, sooner or later comes to light. And when it came, it was like an earthquake that destroyed everything, but that also freed me. Things were about to explode. I felt I couldn't take it much longer. It was as if my body and mind were screaming, either you react or you die here. And the decision wouldn't be mine. It would be from nature itself, from the rain, from the earth, and from the bones that slept beneath that nameless grave. There came a night I'll never forget as long as I live. It was October 1972. I was 20 years and 4 months old. The sky had been heavy all day, those black, heavy clouds that announce a strong storm. The air was so stuffy it seemed like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. Even the neighborhood dogs were restless, howling softly, sensing in the air what was coming. My father came home when it was already getting dark, much more intoxicated than I had ever seen him in my entire life. He smelled of sour whiskey mixed with sweat, that smell that sticks to clothes and skin and doesn't come out. His shirt was open, eyes red, walk staggering. He didn't even look at the food Irene had left on the table, a plate of rice and beans that was already getting cold. Just sat in that old wicker chair in the living room, with his elbows on his knees, head down, breathing heavily. I pretended I was busy folding the clothes I had washed in the morning, but I felt the weight of that gaze on my back. It was as if he were studying me, making a decision. The silence inside that house was as heavy as the air outside. Irene was in the kitchen, but made no noise. Everything was still, waiting. Around 11 o'clock at night, the first thunder tore through the silence like a scream. And then he got up slowly, staggered to the old lantern that was on the sideboard and lit it with trembling hands. The flame flickered, making shadows dance on the walls. When he turned and looked at me, I saw something different in those eyes. It wasn't just the usual anger. It was a mixture of deep despair, old pain, and something that seemed a final decision. As if he had finally decided to finish something he had been carrying for 20 years. "Let's go," he said, with a dragging, heavy voice. Tonight this ends once and for all." My stomach turned. My hands started shaking. I wanted to run, wanted to scream for help, but my feet were nailed to the floor. With trembling fingers, I put on an old cotton skirt, a long-sleeved blouse that was already frayed at the edges, put on the worn sandals that were the only ones I had. Each movement seemed to happen in slow motion, as if my body knew this could be the last time I did those simple things. Irene appeared at the kitchen door when I was heading for the door. Our eyes met, and in that moment I saw, with absolute certainty, I saw that she knew this night would be different from all the others. She knew what my father was going to try to do, and even so, she did nothing. Didn't hold me, didn't scream, didn't call anyone. Just stood there, with that empty expression I knew so well, and then slowly went back into the kitchen. That was the moment I understood. She wasn't going to save me. Never would. The walk to the cemetery began in heavy silence, just the sound of our footsteps on the ground and my father's difficult breathing. The wind had started to blow strong, raising dust, making the tree leaves turn inside out. When we were about halfway there, the rain poured down all at once. It wasn't that fine, gentle North Carolina drizzle. It was a violent storm, the kind that seems to want to wash the whole world. In seconds, we were soaked to the bone. Water ran down our faces, entered our eyes, our mouths. My father stumbled every 3 steps, cursed under his breath, but continued forward as if pulled by an invisible force, by a purpose he had to fulfill. The rain hit so hard it hurt the skin, and lightning illuminated the path in white and scary flashes. Each thunder seemed to announce the end of something. The cemetery gate creaked when my father opened it, that rusty metal sound that gave me chills. We entered, and the feeling was that we were entering another world. The marble graves shone under the rain. The crosses rose like accusing fingers pointing to the black sky. I felt as if all those dead were watching me through the earth, knowing exactly what was going to happen there that night. We walked among the graves, and I saw the names engraved on the headstones when lightning illuminated. Names of people who had been loved, who had had funerals, who had been mourned. And I thought, is this how I'll end up? Buried here, but without a name, without anyone to cry for me? When we arrived at that cursed grave, the ground had already turned into a complete mud pit. The rainwater was accumulating inside, forming a dark puddle that seemed bottomless. My father tried to light the lantern several times, but the wind and rain kept putting out the flame. He gave up. Only the lightning illuminated the scene now, in quick and ghostly flashes that made everything seem even more terrifying. "Kneel," he ordered, and his voice barely came out, hoarse and drunk. I knelt in that cold mud, feeling the wet earth soaking my skirt, sticking to my skin. The rain beat on my back hard. I closed my eyes tight, clasped my hands, and prayed softly. "My God, if you exist, help me. Please, help me." I expected to hear the sound of the belt being taken off, as always. But the sound I heard was different. The sound of metal scraping on wet wood. I opened my eyes very slowly and saw, illuminated by a long lightning flash, that he was holding the shovel. The iron shovel he used to dig graves. The shovel that was leaning against the old tree nearby. All the air left my lungs. "Dad, no, please." He didn't even let me finish. With a strength I didn't know a drunk man could have, he raised that shovel high and hit me in the back. The pain was so absurd, so unbearable, that I couldn't even scream. I just fell forward, with no control, straight into that grave. My face plunged into the cold mud. Dirty water entered my nose, my mouth. I tried to get up, spitting earth. But then came the first shovelful of wet earth on top of me. Today it ends. His voice tore through the night, mixed with the deafening sound of rain and thunder. Today you'll stay with her. You'll stay down there, where you should have stayed since you were born. The wet earth, heavy as lead, began to fall on top of me. First on my back, pushing me down. Then on my head, covering my hair, my neck. I spit mud, tried to scream, but every time I opened my mouth, more earth entered, more water, more despair. I was going to die. I was going to die there, buried alive, at 20 years old, in the same hole that... No, not like this. Not now. Something inside me, a primitive survival instinct, woke up with full force. I started to dig, to scratch the side of the grave with my nails, trying to make a hole, trying to find something firm to grab onto. The mud was soft and slippery because of the rain, and my fingers sank, desperately searching for something, anything. My nails broke, my fingers bled, but I felt no pain. I only felt the terror of being buried alive. And it was in this blind desperation, scratching the muddy bottom of the grave with all the strength I had left, that my hands touched something that wasn't earth. It was soft, but strange. Fabric. Old fabric, soaked for years, that fell apart at my touch like a spider web. And under the fabric, something hard, cold, impossible. Bones. The whole world stopped in that second. The rain kept falling, my father kept throwing earth, but I couldn't hear anything anymore. Just the deafening silence of shock. Just the sensation of those cold and smooth bones in my trembling hands. The heavy rain was washing away the mud around, and when the next lightning illuminated everything for a whole second, I saw. There, right underneath me, exactly where I had been kneeling all those nights, was a complete human skeleton. The empty skull looked at me. The ribs formed a broken cage. The arm bones were bent in a strange position, as if the person had tried to protect themselves. And hanging on what remained of the neck, there was a necklace. A thin gold necklace with a heart-shaped pendant, shining even there in the darkness and mud, as if it had been waiting to be found. I grabbed that necklace with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking, and it was as if lightning had struck my memory. I knew that necklace. I had seen that necklace before. One afternoon when I was a child, about 9 or 10 years old, I was looking for an old sheet in my father's wardrobe and found a shoebox hidden in the back, under a pile of old clothes. Inside was a photo, a single black and white photo, already yellowed, of a beautiful woman, long curly hair, big light eyes, sweet smile, and she was wearing that necklace. That exact heart necklace I was holding now. The woman in the photo who looked like me, the woman my father hid. I raised my eyes very slowly. My father had completely stopped throwing earth. He was standing at the edge of the grave, pale as a corpse, eyes wide open, fixed on me and the necklace I was holding. The shovel had fallen from his hand and was lying in the mud. With my voice coming out hoarse from my throat, soaked with rain and fear and terrible understanding, I screamed as loud as I could, "Who is here underneath? Who is she, Dad? Who is she?" He collapsed to his knees at the edge of the grave. The rain fell on both of us without stopping, and I saw it wasn't just water running down his face. It was tears. Tears mixed with rain, with remorse, with 20 years of guilt. It's your mother, Laura." His voice came out broken, shattered. "Diana, your real mother, your blood mother, Irene." "Irene was never your mother. Never. She was my mistress, that's all." The world collapsed. Diana found out about us. She said she was going to take you away, that she was going to report me, that she was going to destroy me, ruin me. And one night, we argued. I was drunk, she was screaming that she was leaving, and I lost all control. When I came to, she was on the floor. Still, Irene had seen everything, was there, and we brought her here, in the middle of the night, I dug here, right here, in the most forgotten corner of the cemetery. A place nobody ever came to. I buried her without anything, without a casket, without prayer, without anything, and you were so small, just a few months old baby, you wouldn't remember anything. We told everyone she had left, abandoned us, and with time, people forgot about her. Each word was like a stab going deeper. But you grew up, he continued, his voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. You grew up and became just like her. Her honey-colored hair, her green eyes, the way she walked, her smile. It's as if she had come back from the dead. Every day I look at you and see her accusing me, judging me, condemning me to hell. That's why I do what I do to you. Because you are her living ghost. You torment me just by existing. In that moment, something inside me completely shattered. All the questions I had asked my whole life were answered at once. Why Irene was so cold, why my father hated me, why I didn't look like either of them. Why that look of pain every time he saw me. But from the pieces of my broken soul, something new and powerful was born. Anger, strength, will to live, will to honor that woman who was buried beneath me. I looked at those bones, at my mother I never knew, the mother who died trying to protect me, trying to take me away from that monster, and I swore silently, with all the strength I had left. I won't die here, Mom. I promise. I'll get out of here. I'll tell the truth. I'll do justice for you. Adrenaline exploded in my whole body like fire. I grabbed the wet earth wall of the grave and started to climb, scaling, scratching, pulling myself up. I slipped, fell back, but got up again. My father was on his knees on the ground, crying like a child, but didn't try to hold me, didn't try to stop me. It was as if he knew it was over. I made it out. I managed to get my feet out of that cursed grave. And I ran. I ran through the torrential rain, through the dark cemetery paths, among the graves that seemed to encourage me to go on. I fell. I don't know how many times in the mud, got up every time. I held that gold necklace against my chest as if it were the only real thing in the world, the only proof that all of this had really happened. I don't know how long it took. Could have been 10 minutes, could have been a whole hour. Time had lost its meaning. I just know that suddenly I was in front of the police station, banging on the wooden door with what was left of my strength, screaming for help. When the sheriff opened, a middle-aged man named Sheriff Gerald, who knew my father from the bar, and saw a young woman completely covered in mud, bleeding from her fingers, soaked to the bone, with terrified eyes, holding a gold necklace dirty with earth. He widened his eyes. I could only say, before my strength completely abandoned me, My father killed my mother, 20 years ago, buried her in the cemetery. I found her bones. Please, you need to go there. And then my legs gave out and everything went dark. When I woke up, I was on a hard bed with rough white sheets. It took me a few seconds to understand where I was. A strong smell of alcohol and medicine, white walls, a small window with bars. I was in Winston-Salem Municipal Hospital. A nurse came into the room when she saw I had woken up. She was an older woman with gray hair tied in a bun. "Calm down, my child. You're safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you here." I tried to sit up in bed, and the pain all over my body made me moan. My back throbbed where the shovel had hit me. My fingers were bandaged. I had scratches on my face, on my arms, everywhere. The necklace," I managed to whisper with a dry throat. "Where is the necklace?" "It's with the sheriff, dear. It's evidence. But don't worry, it's safe." In the following days, everything happened very quickly. Sheriff Gerald, who had been the one who rescued me that night, organized an operation at the cemetery. They brought forensics, photographers, even people from Raleigh came to help. They exhumed my mother's body carefully, documented everything. The bones were taken for analysis. I stayed in the hospital for 5 days. During that time, the sheriff came to visit me twice to take my statement. I told everything from the beginning: the trips to the cemetery, the beatings, my father's words, the night of the storm, the discovery. He wrote everything down in an old notebook, shaking his head sadly. "I knew your father from the bar, Laura," he said in one of those visits. "He drank a lot, everyone knew. But this I never imagined. 20 years hiding a crime like this." On the third day, they arrested my father and Irene. Both were taken in handcuffs from our house. All the neighbors came out to see, whispering, pointing. The news spread through the whole town in hours. The gravedigger killed his wife and buried her in the cemetery. The girl who was his daughter discovered the bones. 20 years of lies. When the DNA test results came back then, it was still a very new thing, had to be sent to the Capitol. They confirmed what my father had already confessed. That woman buried in the grave was Diana Rose Peterson, my biological mother, missing since 1953, when I was only 8 months old. The trial was quick because my father confessed everything. He and Irene were convicted of qualified homicide and concealment of a corpse. He got 25 years in prison. She, as an accomplice, got 15. The last time I saw my father was in court. He had his hands handcuffed, head down, completely destroyed. Our eyes met for a second, and he murmured, "Forgive me." I didn't answer anything, just turned my face away. But the question everyone asked was, "And now, Laura, how are you going to live?" I had no money, had no home. That house where I lived was rented, and they had evicted everything when they arrested my father. Had no family. Had nothing but the clothes on my back and a gold necklace that had belonged to my dead mother. That's when Mrs. Carpenter appeared. Mrs. Carpenter was a lady who attended the same church I sometimes went to, the little Catholic church downtown. She had followed the whole case in the newspaper, and, a week after I left the hospital, appeared looking for me at the shabby boarding house where I was sleeping as a favor. "Laura," she said, sitting on the edge of the narrow bed, "I can't offer you much, but I have a cousin in Asheville who needs help. She has a boarding house there and needs someone to help in the kitchen and with cleaning. It pays little, but provides food and a small room to sleep. What do you think?" I looked at that kind lady with eyes full of tears. Would you do that for me?" "My child, you need to start over away from here, away from all these memories. Asheville is a good city, peaceful. You can start fresh there." 3 weeks later, in November 1972, I was on a bus to Asheville. I carried an old suitcase with 3 changes of clothes that Mrs. Carpenter had given me, $50 in my pocket, and my mother's necklace hidden inside my bra, close to my heart. The trip lasted almost all day. When I arrived in Asheville, it was almost night. Mrs. Carpenter's cousin, Mrs. Edwards, was waiting for me at the bus station. She was a short, plump woman, about 60 years old, with a wide and welcoming smile. "You must be Laura. Carpenter told me everything, my child. Come with me. You must be tired from all that travel." Mrs. Edwards's boarding house was on a quiet street near downtown. It was a large, old house with about 8 rooms she rented to workers, students, people passing through. She took me to a small room in the back with a single bed, an old wardrobe, and a small window that looked out onto the backyard. "It's simple, but it's yours. As long as you work here, you can stay. Tomorrow morning I'll show you what needs to be done." I sat on that bed, in that room that was now mine, in a city I didn't know, far from everything that had been my life, and I cried. I cried for everything I had lost. I cried for the mother I never knew. I cried for the 20 years of suffering, but I also cried with relief, because for the first time in my life, I was free. The first months in Asheville were difficult. I woke up at 5 in the morning to help Mrs. Edwards prepare breakfast for the guests. I spent the day cleaning rooms, washing clothes, cooking. The work was hard, but it was honest. And for the first time in my life, nobody beat me. Nobody cursed at me. Nobody looked at me with hatred. Mrs. Edwards was a good, patient woman. She noticed when I got too quiet, lost in bad thoughts, and always found a way to distract me. "Laura, come here and help me make this caramel fudge. I'll teach you my grandmother's recipe." It was she who taught me to make that caramel fudge I make to this day. It was she who encouraged me to sell at the farmer's market on Saturdays to earn some extra money. It was she who introduced me to the neighbors, the church people, the baker on the corner. Little by little, I started putting down roots in that city. I met my husband, James, 2 years after I arrived in Asheville. He was a delivery driver, a simple, hard-working man with a good heart. He had no idea where I came from or what I had been through. He only saw a shy young woman who sold fudge at the market. We started talking. He started showing up at the boarding house to see me, and a year later, we got married. I told him everything before the wedding. I thought he would give up when he knew the truth, but he held my hands and said, "Laura, what you went through doesn't define who you are. You're the strongest woman I've ever met, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making you happy." We had 2 children, Michael and Amy. I raised them with all the love I didn't have. Every day I looked at them and thanked God for having survived, for having had the chance to be a mother, to give love. James passed away 10 years ago from heart problems, but he gave me 40 years of happiness, 40 years of peace. I never went back to Winston-Salem, never saw my father or Irene again. I heard from third parties that he died in prison in 1985. She got out in 1987 and disappeared. Nobody knows where she went. And to be honest, I don't want to know. But I made sure to give my mother a proper burial. With the first money I managed to save selling fudge, I had a beautiful white marble headstone made with her name engraved. Diana Rose Peterson, 1930-1953, beloved mother, never forgotten. I placed it in a decent grave at Asheville Cemetery, and every year, on her birthday, I go there to bring flowers. Today, at 73 years old, my life is so different from those terrible days that sometimes it seems like it happened to someone else. But it didn't. It happened to me. And each scar, each difficult memory, brought me here, to this peace I have today. I wake up every day at 6 in the morning, here in my little house in Asheville. It's a simple, small house, but it's mine. I bought it with the money I saved over the years selling caramel fudge. It's 2 small bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, which is where I spend most of my time, and a small backyard where I raise my chickens and have some vegetables. My routine is calm, but full. Early on, after coffee and toast, I start preparing the caramel fudge to sell at Saturday's farmer's market. I put the copper pot on the stove, pour the fresh milk I got from Mr. Thompson on the corner, add the sugar, and stay there, stirring slowly with the wooden spoon. It's work that requires patience. You have to stir constantly or it burns. You have to feel the right point when the consistency is perfect. I've been doing this for over 50 years, and it still calms me, you know? The sweet smell filling the house, the repetitive movement of the spoon, the heat of the stove. It's a meditation. My children live nearby. Michael is 48, a mechanic, married to Susan, and has 2 boys, Gabriel 15 and Lucas 12. Amy is 45, works at City Hall, married Robert, and has 2 girls, Julia 10 and Maria 7. They come visit me almost every day. There's always a grandchild showing up here after school wanting to scrape the bottom of the pot, wanting cookies, wanting Grandma to tell a story. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I go to Amy's house to stay with the girls while she works. We play dolls, I teach them to crochet, tell stories, but not those heavy stories from my life. I tell princess stories, talking animals, light things that children like. They don't need to know what Grandma went through. One day, when they're older, maybe I'll tell them. But for now, I want them to have only good memories of me. Saturdays are my favorite day. I wake up even earlier, arrange all the jars of caramel fudge I made during the week, put them in a cooler, along with some bags of cheese I buy from a local producer, and go to the neighborhood farmer's market. I have my fixed spot there, under a blue tent, between the lady who sells vegetables and the man who sells pies. People already know me, already know my fudge is good. Mrs. Laura, save one for me. Mrs. Laura, did you bring plenty today? It's nice to be known like this, to be respected, to be loved. The money I make from the fudge isn't much, about $300–400 a week depending on sales, but it's mine. And it helps me pay the bills, buy my heart medication, give the grandkids a little present now and then. I don't need much. I learned that happiness isn't in having things, it's in having peace. On Sundays I go to 9 o'clock Mass. I'm devoted to Our Lady. I have a large image of her in my living room. It was she who protected me that terrible night, I'm sure. It was she who gave me strength to survive. After Mass, I always stop by the bakery to buy a cornbread and go have lunch at Michael's house with the whole family together. It's those Sundays that fill my heart. Once a year, every August 15th, which was my mother's birthday, I go to the cemetery here in Asheville and visit her grave. I bring fresh flowers, light a little candle, stay there talking softly with her. I tell her how my life is, talk about the grandchildren. Thank her for trying to save me that night in 1953. I cry a little, but they're good tears. Tears of longing for someone I never knew, but love anyway. I still wear her necklace, that heart necklace I found that night. I had it cleaned, polished, and wear it every day hidden under my blouse. It's my connection with her, my amulet. Sometimes I touch the pendant and feel that she's with me, taking care of me from above. Of course, I still have difficult days. There are nights I wake up sweating, dreaming about that grave, about the rain, about the earth falling on top of me. There are days a memory comes out of nowhere and leaves me sad all day. But I learned to live with it. The wound's healed, but the scars remain. And that's okay. These scars remind me that I'm strong, that I survived, that I won. My neighbors here in the neighborhood respect me. They know my story, because in a small town everyone ends up knowing, but nobody throws it in my face. They treat me with affection, greet me on the street, stop to chat. I have a neighbor, Mrs. Williams, who became a great friend. We have coffee together in the afternoons, embroider tablecloths, talk about life. When I look back at the 73 years I've lived, I see that my life was divided into two very different parts. The first 20 years were of darkness, pain, lies, suffering. But the following 53 years were of light, peace, love, reconstruction. And when I do the math, I see that good won. The good life won. Love won. Today I'm happy. Happy in a simple way, in a humble way, but truly happy. I have my little house, my little work, my beautiful family, my reasonable health for my age, my faith in God. I have friends, I have respect, I have dignity, I have everything that matters. And when I lie down in my bed at night, in that single bed that's just mine, I look at the crucifix on the wall and give thanks. I give thanks for having survived. I give thanks for having had courage that night. I give thanks for the rain that washed the earth and revealed the truth. I give thanks for every day of peace I lived after. My mother didn't have that chance, but I did, and I lived for myself and for her. You know what I discovered in these 73 years of life? That a kept secret is poison. It's poison that contaminates everything around it, contaminates whoever keeps it, contaminates whoever lives nearby, contaminates entire generations. And the only way to stop this poison is by bringing the truth to light, no matter how painful it may be. I know there are people listening to me now who are living inside a lie built by someone in their own family. A father who hurts but says it's discipline. A mother who manipulates but says it's love. A relative who abuses but everyone prefers to pretend they don't see. And you stay there, trapped, thinking you have to endure it because family is sacred, because dirty laundry is washed at home. For years I swallowed that lie. I thought I had to accept it because he was my father. Irene made me believe I was the problem, that if I said something, I would destroy the family. What a monster, right? The person who should protect me was exactly the one who kept me in that hell. But let me tell you something that took me 20 years to understand. You don't destroy anything when you report abuse. The abuser destroys, not you. It was never you. The guilt is never the victim's. If someone in your house is hurting you, whether with their hands, whether with words, whether keeping you in a life you didn't choose, listen well, you don't have to endure it. It doesn't matter who that person is. It doesn't matter if everyone says they're good, that they're respected, that they're just stressed. Abuse is abuse. Period. I understand the fear of reporting, the fear of being alone, of having nowhere to go, of not being believed. I had all those fears. But you know what's worse than fear? It's dying inside every day. It's living like a shadow. It's letting them steal your entire life. Seek help. From the authorities in your region, from protection organizations, from people you trust. In every place in the world, there are people willing to listen to you, to help you. Don't stay silent. Your voice may be what saves you. And if you discover that your family kept terrible secrets, like I discovered in that grave, don't be afraid to bring those secrets to light. That's what saved me. It was discovering the truth about my mother, about who I really was, that gave me strength to run from that cemetery and not stop until I reached the police station. Today, 53 years later, I'm no longer that terrified young woman covered in mud. I was reborn. I built a new life, a family that truly loves me, a peace that nobody can take from me. Evil didn't win. I won. And you can be reborn too. You can rebuild. You can be happy after horror. I'm living proof of that. Now, whoever stayed with me until here, who really heard my story and understood the message, I need you to do 2 things urgently. First, subscribe to Grandparents' Tales now and activate the bell. Don't leave it for later. Do it now. This channel saves lives by sharing real stories. The more people subscribe, the more people can be reached, the more victims can find courage to react. Second, leave a comment down below writing just 1 word, reborn. That's it. Reborn. Whoever watched until the end, who understood that it's possible to start over after trauma, write reborn. I'll read every comment. And others who are going through similar situations will read too and see they're not alone. Do it now. Don't wait another second. Your comment could be the little push someone needs to have courage to report, to leave, to live. Go ahead, subscribe, activate the bell, and write reborn in the comments. Be part of this chain of liberation. Thank you for listening with your heart. May you never give up seeking truth and justice. May you have courage to break the silences that imprison. A big hug from this grandma. God bless you, my loves.